because one of the things Russell and I have observed, and I'm sure you've observed also, is since the election, the libs have been pretty quiet. They've been kind of laying low, right? So I was almost
feel
surprised.
bad for them.
You almost feel bad for them a little bit.
It's like they got kneecapped.
Yeah, exactly. So I was a little surprised to even see an event like that, right? It just seems like it's of a bygone era. But I guess there are still pockets, D.C. being one of them. As someone who lives in D.C., what is it like out on the streets?
I don't know. I see right now.
Right.
People, I'll tell you what. So one, I hear things are getting a little better. I'm here, and I have talked to people who they're not afraid to say that Trump's not the devil. Right. They're not afraid to say to say that anymore. That he's not Hitler.
You see Jim Gaffigan just kind of like did this groveling apology that Trump voters. He never meant to say that he hates them and they'll never forgive him now.
Yeah, it's so I guess it is getting it's getting a little better, but you can kind of overhear when I'm at the mic, people are, you can only hear a little bit of it, but people are calling me a liar as I'm talking, as I'm asking questions, and just kind of like gasping and giving me bad looks. Yeah. But I will say, there was one moment when I was in line to just follow up with them. One woman actually, so we're speaking in line, and after the discussion, she told me that she thought I was there to just make people, as just some crazy guy trying to make everyone uncomfortable. And after the conversation, she said, I don't think that anymore. And I could tell that she had actually, really listened and understood me and respected, what I had to say. And I mean, that unfortunately, that really is a rare occurrence. So rare that I actually was like overwhelmed with emotion. Like inside, I was like, wow, that's what a wonderful, Well,
it makes it worthwhile, man, when you have a good faith interaction with someone whose mind you, if not changed, but at least opened. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about. And I remember, because I have friends who lived in D.C. at the time of January 6th, and I remember after that day, didn't they do a big thing where they put up all this fencing around the Capitol building, right, and really increased security, and they really tried to sort of traumatize the public about this, probably more specifically the city of D.C., to the point where like friends that I knew who lived there said, yeah, you could definitely see the changes made just in terms of security after that day.
Yeah, and I mean, they've been doing this stuff, like hyping it up for years now. I mean, the year after January 6th, I think it was an incredible moment. They had, this ceremony, and Nancy Pelosi mentioned 4 police officers that they died because of January 6th. 4.
Right.
I mean,
they're still doing it. Yeah.
It's really wild. Yeah, they're still doing it. Amy Klobuchar just did it.
There are still people who are convinced that one of the cops got bludgeoned to death. Well, what was it? A fire extinguisher?
Yeah,
they said they
That's
somebody.
what was originally reported by the New York Times and the Washington Post, according to those always reliable anonymous witnesses.
Yep. And I remember the day of. I remember watching it on TV, just having a blast. I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen while it's happening, And when they broadcast over that a woman had been killed inside, I was like, oh, that's a drag. That really takes all the fun out of it, because that's terrible. And they didn't report at first that woman was Ashley Babbitt, a protester who was killed by a cop. They didn't lie and say it wasn't that. They just said there's been a shooting, a woman's dead, which led everybody to assume when they're watching that one of the protesters just opened fire on a security guard or something, right? Now, they didn't explicitly say that didn't happen, But to this day, when you hear it covered, they will refer to it as the deadly attack on the Capitol. Now, a deadly attack on the Capitol, of course, implies that the people who charged the Capitol or entered the Capitol building killed an innocent person in there. But that, as you just said to that guy's face, that did not happen. That did not happen. So, I mean, there has been just so much just rank propaganda around this. This was the event that I think they used to try and just completely delegitimize Trump and the Trump movement out of fear he would run again and win again. And look how it worked.
Absolutely, yeah. It got close, I think, it gave him a chance. And, even worse than like deadly attack, that a place, yeah, it's like you say, yeah, people died, you could call it that, but it wasn't at the hands of the rioters. Worse than that, even Rachel Maddow, of course, called it a murderous siege. I mean,
right.
People, they didn't murder anyone.
You had who is it? The queen of bad takes on The View, and that's saying something. Sunny Hostin, who compared it to the Holocaust and 9/11.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, just now. Yep. Absolutely. And I'm sorry, Mac.
No, I was just going to say, like, they're just reaching so much, like, to classify suicides from days, weeks later after the event as line of duty deaths. That's nuts. And it's also, I mean, I think it's not good. We shouldn't be, honor their service, honor their lives. Let's not honor freaking suicide, as a line of duty. Well,
death. The way my opinion on that was always like, I was more sympathetic to the BLM protests. As someone sympathetic to those protests, I wouldn't want a police suicide days later blamed on those protests, right? So if I wouldn't want it blamed on the movement I support, then I can't say that you blame this on January 6th. And now all of this, you peel back another layer of the onion and you find out the number of feds who were in the crowd, Ray Epps, obviously FBI presence among the protesters themselves. Obviously, you had, as Joe Scarborough very famously ranted the next day about the Capitol Police, you opened the fucking doors for them. Okay, well, schmuck, if they opened the doors for them, doesn't that tell you this was to some degree a setup, right? I'm not saying you could prove everything the day after, but that was another thing I thought. I thought they wouldn't just open the doors for people unless this was somewhat of a sting operation, I mean, I'm from Newburgh, New York. There was a story where the FBI came into Newburgh. They sent an informant to a local mosque, and they just created out of thin air a bogus terrorist plot, which they roped 4 very poor men into. They set them up. And so, this sort of, reminded me of that in the sense that during the War on Terror years, it was the black Muslim men who were the boogeymen that we were supposed to fear. And so the FBI went out and they created a bunch of black Muslim terrorists. Well, in the Trump era, it's the white nationalists who we were all supposed to fear. And so what do we got to do? We got to go create some white nationalist terrorists. It struck me as the same thing. I mean, I know you've talked about January 6th a lot. You've written about it a lot. When did it occur to you that something was off there and that there may be more government involvement than originally met the eye?
I mean, there were 2 big things. The Ray Epps stuff, like you mentioned. I mean, you have a guy who's on camera saying we're going to storm the Capitol the night before January 6th. And everybody in the crowd is calling him a Fed, chanting Fed, Fed, Fed. I mean, that's incredible. This same line that the media and the Democrats used for propaganda purposes. Stormed the Capitol, stormed the Capitol. He used the same line. And he said he was telling people to do so repeatedly. He's caught on camera repeatedly. And he's right there at the first barrier that protesters, become when they become rioters and overcome the barrier. He's right there whispering into another guy's ears right at the barrier before they push it over. And then another thing that I think is pretty sketchy is the pipe bomb situation.
Yes.
So
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very significant because, that when they talk about like, how deadly and dangerous and all the weapons, like, well, they cite the pipe bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, so for people, just to summarize, there were pipe bombs found at the DNC and the RNC too, I believe, headquarters in DC. And this took a lot of resources, police resources, away from the Capitol to investigate this. And what they, the way, okay, so what police did is, and FBI, they release video of the pipe bomber, but very suspiciously, the frame rate is extremely low, like 5 frames per second. I'm a video guy. Video is typically standard is like minimum 30 frames a second, commonly 60 frames a second.
Right.
Those are your standard video cameras. They literally don't make cameras at as low a frame rate as this video released was. So it really seems like it was tampered with. It just doesn't make any sense that the most, the wealthiest, institution like the Democratic Party, or one of the richest institutions like the Democratic Party, wouldn't have cameras that just operate with the very minimum quality that anyone can get, at a Best Buy or Target or your damn phone. I mean,
well, I'll say this, and, I don't know how YouTube safe this is, so I'll leave this up to the editors, but I heard Alex Jones give his theory about the pipe bomb, and, this is one of the things that I think he's probably, if I had to bet, I would say he's probably right, that they probably planted the pipe bombs, that the government probably planted the pipe bombs.
Damn reptiles came running up out of the sewers.
So that if they couldn't get a riot going, they would detonate the pipe bomb, right? Like if they couldn't actually gin up the kind of riot at the Capitol, they needed some cataclysmic event to castrate the Trump movement. That was a plan B. I don't know that, but when I heard that, I was like, you know what? That actually does make more sense than anything I've heard, because when you think about it, well, how do they not know who planted those at this point?
Yeah.
That's fucked. That's that.
And they don't have video at a normal frame rate. Like it's so they make it so low quality.
Luigi didn't even do nothing, and they caught him at a fucking Starbucks.
yeah. Great
They don't
point.
know what the guy who planted the pipe bombs.
Great point. And also the way
You're telling me a guy in that kind of shape eats at McDonald's.
Right.
And the way they caught all these January 6th rioters is they used geolocation, so they're using cell phone data.
Exactly.
Right.
They were able to fucking pick people out of the crowd who were just on the field. Months later, we've got a video from here. They don't know who planted the pipe bomb.
But when supposedly, this is a wild story. When they tried, so they were asked. I forget what congressman asked, and I don't think this was an open hearing, but they asked, okay, why didn't you use geolocation to find this pipe bomber? And they said, oh, we did try, but that data was corrupted. Think about that.
Fucked up. It's very strange. Yeah, the pipe bomb thing is really, really, really stinks. It really does.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, they didn't even have to detonate it. Like, they didn't have to have a plan to detonate something. It's just a diversion that took resources away from the Capitol. So you have less forces to defend the Capitol. And not to mention, you can say, there were bombs there to help paint it as, a terrorist event.
Right. Yeah. No, it is. That is. Yeah, Leah. I like that you mentioned that, because that was always the thing. That was always one of the darker mysteries of that. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, that is one of the fishiest parts of the whole thing. But you didn't just do a January 6th style. You didn't just ask about January 6th. You got some more video here that you published. So I'll set this up separately as its own piece. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. Keaton Weiss, Russell Dobler here with independent journalist Matt Orfala in D.C. I assumed you had planned to go, but you did not plan to go. You stumbled upon it, and then you pulled the video offline, and you published this. This is kind of newsworthy, I think. ABC's Jonathan Karl calls Trump felony charges tawdry. Why is this even being prosecuted? You don't hear him talking like that on ABC too much, but here he is.
Ultimately, the only criminal trial that happened related to the past and future president was the one in New York. A pretty complicated case involving payments that his fixer and lawyer made to a porn
falsification
actress.
of records about
Falsification of records that in and of itself wasn't a felony, but if you tied it to a campaign finance violation because you make the argument he did it so it wouldn't hurt his campaign if she had spoken out. I mean, it's a pretty complicated, tawdry set of, and you think that's the thing that he went on trial for.
Yeah.
But not what you spent all your time investigating.
Yes, a little bit.
How much of a problem? Because, frankly, a fair observer could look at that New York case and say, why is this even being prosecuted?
Well, and I think he did say that. And
he said it, but I think a fair observer can say it.
Exactly.
I like that line. Well, yeah, he said it, but a fair-minded person might also say that the case shouldn't have been brought.
Even a fair-minded person might.
It's like, hold on, there's so much about this that I think is funny. Well, first of all, why does he have to say, I think a fair-minded person? Isn't he supposed to be a fair-minded person? He's the fucking Washington correspondent at ABC News. Like, the media people, they paint themselves to be fair-minded observers. It's like, well, I think some fair-minded observer could say it. It's like, you can't just say it himself. I think a fair-minded observer. Anyway, also, look at the January 6th investigator, the lead January 6th investigator. He immediately tries to reframe it as, oh, that's a Trump talking point. Trump says that. But I got to give Jonathan Karl some props for actually, not letting him do that. It's like, no, I think a fair-minded observer can say that too.
Well, when was this? Was this after the sentencing or before the sentencing?
Just before.
Just before.
Yeah, I think this is just before. So isn't that great? Like waiting after. I mean, it's a good comment to hear finally after the charges, after the trial, and just at sentencing. After the election, too, of course.
Well, yeah, that's the big one, obviously. But yeah, just as sentencing was going. Oh, here, I'll play this one more time.
Frankly, a fair observer could look at that New York case and say, why is this even being prosecuted?
Well, and I think he did say that. And
he said it, but I think a fair observer can say it.
Exactly.
He's an interested observer, but,
It fed the narrative that it's lawfare. It is a Democratic prosecutor who is bent on taking me down with whatever tool, dusting off this obscure statute where I'm falsifying, business records.
Well, that's because it obviously was lawfare. And it obviously just crashed and burned. As obviously you're a veteran of the first Bernie movement, as are Russ and myself, to look at this being the state of resistance liberalism, like this is where it ends. In a tiny bookstore with a tiny crowd talking about January 6th and
wearing Fauci socks.
In Fauci socks, yeah. With a Fauci tote bag.
Oh, man. Oh,
like this is the end of that project. This is where it went. And, it's kind of, I look at it. It's funny, obviously. How is that not funny, right? It's fucking great. But they just couldn't be reasoned with. They just had to be destroyed at the end of the day. Like, I think the Bernie movements, which you were, like I said, a veteran of, you worked for the campaign for a brief period of time, you offered your services, you would have been a tremendous asset to them. You can get into how that fell apart if you'd like, but as someone who started there, to see the sort of Hillary wing of the party end up here, what a trajectory that was. And boy, did they do that to themselves. They just ultimately they just would not listen to reason. Right? Yeah. They ultimately just paved this course for themselves.
Yeah. That's, and Bernie, he was too polite, he wanted to be, he gave a good talk, but, but where Trump would eventually say, no, fuck you, I'm going to keep saying this, Bernie would just keep apologizing for stuff he should never apologize for.
Right.
And I mean, that did happen over and over again, not just with Bernie, but that's what killed the movement. That's why Trump's movement succeeded. They didn't do that. They didn't make that mistake.
Well, Matt, I know as soon as anybody said boo, they got rid of you. So you didn't spend a lot of time on the inside. But I read that as two things. What Hedges said, that Bernie said he didn't want to get nadered. And I think that thing with his wife with that college was part of it. Because the better he did, the more you saw that story in the papers about funny business at that college. And if you notice, as soon as he bent the knee, you never heard about it again. It went away. So it might not just be congenital politeness.
Yeah. I'm probably giving him too much credit.
But what was it? I mean, if you want to get into this, you can. I didn't tell you we'd be talking about this. But what was it that drove a wedge between you and the movement? How did you end up getting fired, unhired? How exactly did that go down?
So they hired me to be a creative editor for them. My videos had outperformed the campaign's official videos. So
right. This is for the Bernie campaign in 2016.
That's 2020, but
it was 2020.
But I did get some compliments in 2016 too. But they reached out, they hired me. They said, officially hired me, signed the documents to be their creative editor, and then they found out I had a history of creative editing. And what I had done is I had edited a video of MLK's I Have a Dream speech. It was a comedic video. I remixed it into a deepfake. This is 15 years before deepfakes were even a thing. Into MLK's I Have a Wet Dream speech. And it was just a funny video. And there was, just objectively nothing racist about it. But, at that time, there's nothing worse than being called the racist.
That was the line of attack against Bernie both times, is that he had a blind spot when it came to race and gender and all that shit. Yeah.
It still boggles my mind that the establishment Democrat, side of the party was able to get away with that. Because, Bernie Sanders, he literally, protested during the civil rights movement and got arrested, chained to protesters during the civil rights movement. It's just absurd how, they actually got away with that. And I think the only way they got away with it is because people were so afraid of it that they wouldn't fight back. Even though you could, especially with like old film video evidence like that, you got to fight back hard and you will fucking destroy them. But they didn't do that.
Right.
I really can't stress enough how damaging just that accusation, racist, was. Like, there's really nothing worse.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah. For example, I have to share this because this is very funny.
Well, that was really at the peak of that, of cancel culture and call out culture. That was really when it was riding high.
And just to explain how, that was worse than anything. Okay, they did have a senior advisor on the campaign who actually had a criminal record. He was convicted of embezzling at money at a union, the United Steelworkers Union. So you literally have somebody convicted of stealing money from unions with a criminal record. And when the media attacked him, Bernie Sanders' campaign was like, no, they actually, here's how they defended him. They said, that's racist to attack him for that because he's a person of color. Just how wild is this? And so my history of a comedic YouTube video from over 10 years prior, now way even longer, that was considered more socially toxic.
Wouldn't you have been a teenager?
I wasn't. I mean, I was 20 something, young 20-year-old.
When you made the MLK video?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm actually proud of it because I saw it, like, this was before deepfakes was even a thing. And I wrote in the goddamn description. I'm not making this up now. Like that, I thought this was a great reminder of how easily media can be manipulated. And so I'm like manually, editing like phonemes together, and now AI does that just like that. So it is scarier. But so instead of thanking me for warning everyone about deepfakes before the Democratic Party, 15 years before the Democratic Party, they're like, we're going to eliminate you for that.
They drove you out. Wow. Well, Matt, do you want to tell people where they could find you before we let you go? We got a couple more segments on the line, but we can. I think we got a couple with you, so let people know where they can find your work.
You can watch my videos at mattorf.tv, and you can read my writing at orf.report. And the best way to support me is to become a paid subscriber at orf.report.
Orf.report, and that's a Substack?
It is, yeah.
Beautiful. All right, Matt Orfala, great to see you again, man. Thank you for your work.
Matt. Are you going to the inauguration?
Yeah, I think I should do that. Who knows? If I could just like walk to a bookstore and that happens, like I think I should go to the inauguration.
Well, Russ will be there.
We're live streaming to Rumble, so
cool.
We'll run into each other.
Cool. All righty. Good to see you, man.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
That's Matt Orfala, everybody. All right, Andrew, I believe we have an ad to play, and then we'll come back with the rest of the program.